Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 413 and my guest is Wylie McGraw. Wylie's story is a ride through professional baseball, competitive bull riding, and 3 tours of service as a U.S. Army combat veteran. He's also the host of Wise Words and Whiskey podcast. We had a great conversation. This took place a little while ago, and I'm just now getting it out into the world. And really interesting guy, really a stand-up guy. Love talking to him. And I think you will enjoy this one. General stuff, I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. And follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my music wherever you get your music, and it should be there. And rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. We're coming up on 8 years, which is so bonkers to me. I really appreciate you, and thanks for, being a part of this journey with me. Be well, be kind, be love. Here we go. Wylie McGraw, welcome to Hey Human.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I learned of you through Rebecca, our mutual business associate, I guess is a good way to put it. And she had reached out to me actually about you in general. And I started reading your bio and I thought, wow, I want to get this guy on my show. Because I was trying to help her get you on another show. Yeah. And so I'm really glad you're here. It's
well, thank you.
Fun. Yeah,
I think so too. And thank you for the support on the other show as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Let's start with, where did you grow up? What shaped you into becoming who you are now?
Well, that's quite the story. So I'll do my best to truncate it as fast as furious as possible. But I was born in Southern California. So I'm from Orange County, California originally. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And I grew up into a household of sports. So my father was a semi-pro ball player in the 70s. As an outfielder, had potential to be a professional baseball player. But at the time, a lot of different variables from there wasn't a ton of money in sports in the 70s, et cetera. And of course, his ambitions were probably laying elsewhere. So he didn't go that route. However, having 3 sons, the firstborn, showcasing that he had an arm at a very young age, my dad started to cultivate, the whole sports persona. So we were put right into sports. Myself, baseball was a primary focus, but I did play football off season. I did play some soccer as a young kid, which I really enjoyed as well. My middle brother played some baseball, but he was more of a football focused guy. And then my youngest brother, who came 6 years after I was born, at some point when he got older, he started to do a little bit of all of the different sports, but I think he found his footing in like the cross country and track and field. So we found our own niches as, these young men. But baseball, growing up in a household full of, grandparents were entrepreneurs, uncles and aunts, medical professionals, doctors. My dad was an entrepreneur, also worked real estate his entire life. So he sold really, really good high-end properties and things like that. I grew up in a pretty decent middle class, I would say upper middle class family. However, it's big Irish, Scottish, Catholic family. So all my grandparents are, they hail from Scotland and Ireland. So I grew up in that kind of household where it was very strict, disciplined, very focused, stoic, if you will, at times. So a lot of it was very, you were meant as a child to be seen and not heard, mind your P's and Q's. My parents taught me, manners, morals, respect for my elders. So I grew up in that kind of environment. However, there were a lot of other variables to the intensity of that kind of family dynamic that helped mold us as well. I mean, dealing with people that had very high functioning addictions to stress, a lot of generational stress and trauma that was not dealt with. So that seeped into the family life as I grew up, but sports were the outlet. So I played sports year in and year out, excelled at it as a pitcher. I was a starting pitcher on every baseball team that I played on because of my talent and capabilities. And as I got older, I noticed that I got into high school and I was like, okay, I started to have those conversations as a young man going, okay, but what do I really want? Is sports the thing I actually really chose? And I realized I was actually put into the game and not really, I didn't get to decide the game itself. I didn't get to choose that path. So as I got into high school and started to develop my friendships and, your personality grows, I had that battle in my mind of like where I wanted to go. And I started to seek out alternative worlds that really started to challenge that. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to go break away from the conditioning of you're going to perform perfect in the sport. You're going to be an athlete year in and year out. This is your focus. You go to church, you go to school, you do your work, get good grades. And I did well. I mean, my off time, I played GI Joes with my brothers and my friends in the neighborhood. We rode BMX bikes. We escaped all the time. We're Gen X kids. So we were always away from the house. We weren't focused on sports. So it was really cool. I got those experiences, learning how to survive on water from garden hoses and riding bikes 10 miles away from home when you're not supposed to. And it was fun. But as you get older, you go, okay, well, where am I going to start grounding myself to what it is that I want? And you start to notice those patterns, those emotions, those thoughts, and they start to conflict with what you grew up with. And for me personally, I started to combat that path that I felt that I was being put on. And I found myself naturally challenging what my dad expected of me. And I chose to move towards a different direction. So at that point, I got into bull riding. I think at 16 years old in high school, I got into this competitive world of riding bulls and rodeo. That excited me, turned me on to a whole new meaning of life itself, what it meant for me to be a little bit more wild, a little bit more free. And I wanted more of that. So I started chasing things that kind of mimicked those environments. And the next best thing that came from that experience was the military. And of course, coming also from a legacy military family, it made sense. So at the same time, that would be kind of like a part of the path or the decision-making process. So in a nutshell, I grew up it's not like there was no danger or chaos to the degree of like I had a very bad upbringing. But again, I grew up in a good household as far as manners and morals and P's and Q's and learning how to actually live in society and respecting one another. But the stress of the dynamics in the family, they started to play a role in where I wanted to take my life. And I think that's why when I got into the high school world, I found myself pulling away from sports and got into rodeo and then eventually the military and said, I want to go get away from all this and figure out how to carve my own path.
How was the family reaction to you deciding to go a different direction? The fact that your eldest child probably helps, I imagine.
Well, it's interesting because my father, so I look like my dad. So I'm literally a spitting image of him. And I think my dad expected me as a leader of the boys for the two brothers to set the example and to lead by that example, but to stay focused on a very specific career path so that I can mold and shape the younger brothers to do the same. Again, very successful people in my family. I mean, we're talking about hospital executives, doctors. My grandparents were multimillionaires because their investments and their entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So it's my dad's dad was a World War II vet, Normandy as well, a retired police chief. So there's this interesting background between all the different members of the family. But my father, he wanted something specific for me, and I understand and respect that. I get it. But when I decided to start to naturally break away from, I would say it's almost like I felt more confined by the expectation rather than free. I loved baseball. I loved to play the game, but it naturally didn't evolve to where I could go to college and play it where I should have gone. I did my own thing. And to answer your question, really, what was interesting was my dad and I got into a lot of heated back and forth arguments and conversations throughout high school because of that decision. He did not like me riding bulls. He told me he gave me an attitude, which I thought was hilarious. And I was like, well, I've got an attitude because of how I'm being expected to perform. So I don't know. I would say I look back now, given especially everything I've done in my life and even the work I do, et cetera, it gave me a whole new playing field with dealing with the unknowns and stress and dealing with and managing confrontation and learning how to stay in the discomfort and realizing that discomfort doesn't mean it's bad. It just means something's changing. So I took that, parlayed it into the rest of my life and realized I was built to confront, and I just needed those experiences to awaken that up. And I think that, again, I look at it this way. I was going to church. I was praying for a different life. I wanted to look, maybe God was directing me in that way where it's like, hey, Wylie, I need you to confront something so you can expose a little bit more of how you were built and you can find your footing in life, the path you want to go on. And so you can walk that path. And to me, I cherish the decision to go against my dad's wishes. And I honor the confrontation that I had with him through high school. And it was very uncomfortable coming home on a daily basis, being under his roof. My dad's very stoic and he gives you a look and you're like, okay, I'm not crossing that boundary. My dad's not a pushover. So having those interactions built me into a different type of more resilient man and really helped me excel in the military and then take that from the military and move out into the world where finding my footing as an entrepreneur and do my own thing. Really, I look back and I'm grateful for it. So
isn't it interesting that we put a negative connotation on confrontation? That word in and of itself just sounds very intense, when really all it is having boundaries and having a voice and learning how to have your own voice.
Right.
And saying, this is who I am, and having dominion over oneself. And I think now, I mean, you're Gen X, right? So the language back then, not so much. The language now, of course, facilitates that kind of standing up for oneself, but you grew up in a totally different time. And that takes big cojones, I think, to stand up to the father, especially as the eldest child. Where was mom around?
No, my parents were divorced when I was 12. That stress did not help, given the three brothers. So again, it's horrible when parents get divorced in general, regardless of the situation. So that was another whole role. I had to be the oldest in that dynamic to help deal with my mom's new husband, my dad's new relationship, the brothers, etc. So there was a lot more of that compounded on top of everything we had going on. They did the best they could for what they had going on, and it is what it is. And at this point, I think all these years later, they're still best friends. They've known each other since my mom was 13 years old. So it's not like they're going anywhere. But the reality here was, in that time, you mind your P's and Q's. You respect your elders. You don't argue and combat your parents or grandparents, and however, I also feel like there's a spectrum to that. Just like you just said, confrontation sounds like a very charged word, but there's a spectrum to confrontation. I think the lowest end of it would be to just do something you need as a boundary and ask someone to participate that otherwise would neglect or reject you for it. Might be uncomfortable for you as a lower end spectrum of the confrontation. Whereas the higher end could be an actual all out physical altercation with someone, or it's straight up getting into a raging argument to create some form of like discord or change in the relationship or dynamic. And I think people miss that as well. They go confrontation equals discomfort, I don't like, and I avoid it. And then they get upset and wonder why things aren't necessarily changing or their fruit isn't being produced through the efforts that they are putting out. And I've had a conversation with someone recently about that. And they said, I'm not a confrontational person. I mean, yeah, but you've been doing the way you've been doing for 15 years. Nothing's been changing. So maybe it's time for you to actually confront X in your life, and maybe have that conversation that you've been avoiding this entire time, because that's what you've been missing, is that one piece of confrontation. And it's just telling the person how you feel, sharing with them what you need, tell them what you want for your life, and letting them have their reaction and realizing nothing bad's going to happen to you. So
yeah, I mean, it's tied into ego, right? We're afraid to say how we feel about things because we don't want the other person to think less of us, and so we keep quiet. And that
a big part of it, yeah.
I think a big part of that too is self-awareness. The fact that we don't even confront ourselves with so much.
Oh, we avoid more than we actually confront. And I think you'll appreciate this is it takes more energy to avoid something than it does to confront it. It sounds counterintuitive, but the truth is you actually have to exude so much more mind space, brain energy, heart energy, all of it to hold on to and avoid something, rather than just going, you know what, I'm going to have this uncomfortable moment with this person or this situation because I need to not carry this anymore and I need to move through it. And I think that's the hardest. Adversity does build character, and it does build resilience, and it does build strength within us to handle life's challenges and problems that we face, because life is basically war. We're going to constantly go through them. It's like training at the gym or anything you might do. If you're not doing it consistently and getting the experience, when you actually face something real and really hard, you crumble under that pressure, and then you're back. I think it's like that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're further back than you wanted to be, and you're grasping for what's next to pull you through that. And then I think that's the last thought here, I would say, is that's where people get lost in the world of spending time, energy, and money on solutions they think outside of themselves that are going to pull them through those problems, rather than realizing I have to first address myself, and then I have to confront that reality, and then I have to go do something about it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said life is like war. I mean, as terrible as that sounds, I actually agree with that statement. We do fight our battles all the time. Right. We're constantly, life is a series of walking through fire.
It is. And if it's too comfortable, you don't grow. And it's one of my favorite quotes. I kind of altered it, because I live by it. But I'm trying. Anne Frank said it was, you only truly know someone when you fight them. It is only then that their character is revealed. And it is so true. Even in when it comes to people coaching each other, when it comes to therapy, when it comes to anything in life that is meant to propel us forward in a more progressive manner as an individual. If you're not willing to fight that person through whatever dynamic is sticking, because human beings are very resistant to change. So anything that's ugly and uncomfortable that they deemed as do not touch, do not look, do not say, those are the very things we should be fighting. Those are the very things we should be confronting, interrupting, getting out in the front, because those are the very things that are in fact limiting people's capacity to actually experience more for their life. But we want to tiptoe around that. We want to find the hack or the shortcut. And we want to create an idea of discomfort in our mind by doing kind of some little, we'll do a couple reps in the gym. I feel a little bit of a burn in my bicep, so I'm going to stop right there. Whereas if you were to embrace that burn and go beyond that burn, that's when the muscle really starts to grow. And I think that's the piece that's missing too.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into military, I want to just, because how often do I get to talk to someone that's ridden around on a bull? What was that like?
Scary.
And also, not to be rude, but how does that not just destroy your genitals?
Okay. I know, it's not rude. It's a great question. I think you're the second person who's ever asked me that. So it's interesting is because it's all about technique and fundamentals. So when you learn how to sit on the back of the animal, again, like we're men, we have those things there. I'm sitting on a chair. So at the end of the day, I'm still not crushing myself. Well, there's a technique to it. There's a way you sit down on it. Riding bulls is no different. However, it's a live animal underneath you. So there's a lot of gyration and movement underneath you. So there's a lot could happen. And I have been jarred there a few times. So it's not like it doesn't happen. However, the focus, but riding bulls was scary, exciting, exhilarating, nerve-wracking. It was all emotions you truly can feel at once when you start doing it at first. All present. It's almost like a flood of every part of you just becomes alive. You go, wow, I never even understood as a human being what that would even feel, look, or sound like. And
you're talking about adrenaline, like the adrenaline drug? Or?
Not even the adrenaline, just it's almost like it's the awakening of your mind, the ability to, it almost broadens your horizons. It's I don't know how to explain it. It's such an experiential thing. However, I would say it ignited a version of myself that I think had been missing playing baseball with my dad and growing up in that household. It was like this exciting new part of this wild version of Wylie that I knew was there that I didn't know how to access. It's almost like getting into that very uncomfortable environment, which is bull riding. Rodeo is very dangerous. It's very full of unknowns. That's the key. It excited me because there were so many variables of unknowns that I could not control. And I think that's what really pulled me towards it more, is because what could you be capable of if you embrace the unknowns, you embrace the fear that comes from those unknowns, and then you learn from what you discover when you get shocked by what comes at you through that unknown. And to me, bull riding gave all of that to me, on top of a couple of Charlie horses and some racked, groin area stuff and some broken bones. But
back, I'm sure.
Yeah, broken. Yeah, I fractured my L4 when I was 21. So it is amazing how that all it was almost like it solidified the world of, okay, what fear means, what we can do with fear, how we can harness it, it's not about trying to get rid of it and realize it's about recognizing it and why it's being stimulated, and how do we harness that situation to then exude it into our performance so that we can execute upon a task we may not be in total control of, and realizing that life is full of unknowns and life is full of variables we cannot control. I think humans try to control everything, and that's why I feel they're miserable and they're unfulfilled and they're always seeking more things. And they're not surrendering and realizing there's a lot we can't control, and there's other factors in life that we need to give ourselves to. So bull riding just became this 5 years. I did it competitively on a lighter end. I got to just be more grittier, more wild. I got to explore versions of sides of myself that I wasn't even allowed to exude in that household, and I got rowdy with cowboys. I learned how to fist fight better that way. I mean, all those different pieces gave me a new view of the world around me. And I took that as a really nice stepping stool, but also a really good tool for me as a human being. I'm not saying you have to go ride a bull, but I would find environments that are similar that really scare you, because if it doesn't really scare you, it's not really going to change you. If you're not shocked from within, nothing changes. You have to be rattled. And I think it goes back to confrontation we talked about, is if you're not willing, I confronted the fear. I got on the back of a bull. I said, I'm going to do it anyway. And when that bull fell on me, I loved it. I was like, okay, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's see what else I can do. Let's see what else I'm capable of. And at some point, if God tells me stop, I'm going to stop. And one day I got stopped, and that's just how it works. So
what stopped you?
I broke my back.
Oh, that would do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm fortunate. I would say blessed, because I was in the Army at the time, and we'll go to that. I was on leave and I fractured my L4, but I fractured the body of the L4 hairline. So I didn't break any of the external bones, and I didn't damage any of the nerves. It was just a hard impact, blunt force trauma to the lower back after I got thrown off. And I got rehabbed for a few months, and I got back into training. So I definitely didn't lose out on any opportunities. Thank God. So
the way you're describing being on the bull, it feels like what I imagine an Olympian feels, or it's that idea, or a ballet dancer, or that thing, or even somebody that's deep in meditation, or kung fu, or any of that stuff. It's almost like your whole body has to be on at the same time until it becomes almost like a flow state, and that things just you respond, and you probably not in the beginning, I'm sure, but that you develop it into being such a hyper awareness of every part of not only your being.
That's good.
I mean, I've ridden on horses, and I know that you have to really, it sounds corny, but you have to become one with the horse to really have an exceptional ride. You become one being.
You do.
I imagine that it's kind of like that.
It's exactly a great way to describe that for people too, because you do have to connect to that animal. And that's the thing is, it, like horses, I love riding horses too. When you're on the back of that, that's a life. You're on the back of another living creature. There's a spirit there. So you connect to that animal, and you realize that this is not, if you separate yourself, that's when I found that when I would do the separation, when I'd be too focused on, I'm going to ride, and I get too hurried into my prep routine to get on the back of him, I would actually get thrown off much quicker, or I'd get slammed a little harder. When I would be present, a little bit more focused, and I would connect to the animal, I would feel that life underneath me. I would feel his breath and moving in and shifting in that chute prior to come out, putting our rope on there, smelling him, and just connecting with him, slowing down, and actually allowing myself to be present, to be focused, to be one with my emotions, connecting to just that moment. My rides were way better. Now, it doesn't mean you don't practice. We have fundamentals. You go train on barrels that we build together to practice the bucking patterns, and you strengthen your body. You have to strengthen your forearms. Bull riding is 80% legs. So you asked about, the groin area. A lot of the times you're posting yourself by squeezing your legs up off the animal. So there's a lot of physical demand in that sport as well. But as the years progress, like riding horses, I was the same way. When I first got my first horse, I'm like, I don't know what to do. After a while, you become one with that animal, and they can feel you too. And then it's almost like a dance. You just have this beautiful dance, and you end up performing way better. It's interesting how that works.
Oh, the animal knows.
Yeah.
I believe the animal knows.
Oh, they do.
When you're connecting to them. It's a respect and an honor thing. Granted, I'd hate to be a bull with all my junk tied up in a knot or whatever they do to make them so pissed off.
Well, they are raised. Number one, they're raised to do that. So they are the rough stock that these companies raise for babies are bred to buck. That's literally all they're designed to do. It's like a racehorse. They're bred to buck. They know when they get into that tight confined space, and they have that what's called a flank strap that's wrapped. It's closer to like if I was to strap around your bladder and squeeze right around that area, a rope really tight, that's uncomfortable. So yes, there's a flank strap there that they're trying to kick off as well. Plus they have your rope right underneath their breastplate. So that you have these two ropes on this animal. So it's already designed to do that. And then on top of that, you're giving it in this confinement, and you're putting these ropes on. Of course, it's going to blow out of that gate when that gate opens, and it's going to try to throw you and everything else that it's got on it. But I've spent time in rodeo arenas prior to a jackpot that I've ridden in, hanging out with some of the rough stock that we were going to ride the next day. And they're just grazing, walking around us while we're drinking beer. And they're not kicking us, trying to kill us. So they're just docile, loving creatures as well when they're not put in that position to do their job. So it's pretty wild to have that experience. Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I love this. I've never been able to ask these questions, so it's really great.
That's great. That's great.
Do you know, too, going back to this conversation about confrontation, I have a show that I do on YouTube with my friend who's a sexologist, and we had it's a sex and relationship show, and we had an episode about communicating, and I talked about how they say when you have to have those really big conversations with your partner or family, whatever, that to touch them in some way, whether your feet are touching or your hands are touching. And I feel like it's a little bit of the same sort of thing, the little hand on the shoulder or being so close in proximity that your energetic fields, if you will, are commingling.
Yeah.
That it facilitates a much better communication in those times of stress when you have to talk about the really important things.
Yeah, that's good. That's good that you brought that up. My brain's going 1,000 miles an hour with that one. It's interesting is, yes, people that have to have the hard arguments or conversations in the relationship, most of the time when it starts to get really hot, what's the first thing most people do? Timeout. To me, I go, no. I think even my psychologist colleagues I have that work in my business with me over the years, to the fact that what I've even understood in the dynamics of human beings, how messy we really are, those are the moments when it's getting hot. That's when you're getting truth. That's when you're getting the clarity of what's really going on. And that is when you should actually stay engaged. Now, you'd also need to, caveat, discern the difference between whether it's just becoming some argumentative, violent experience versus a very hot, heated,
productive
debate, back and forth, productive conversation. That's the other thing is, let's make sure we don't go, you know what, I'm just going to engage in this until someone pulls out a gun and we get into a gunfight. That's not what I'm saying here. But like your friend said, like you talk about on your other show, it really, the touching or at least being in proximity, sometimes when things are exploding, touching is not necessarily a good thing. People need to keep that, but being engaged and staying in that heat, that is where the real transformation of that conversation can go. If the two people or more are open and willing to keep engaging and understanding the other side rather than trying to win the argument. I think that's the other thing is we try to win arguments rather than trying to find solutions to the problem. It's not about winning. And that's not really what it's about. So I like that because if I have an argument with someone I know and it's a really heated one because I'm a big energy and I can create some eruption, I'm staying engaged in that. I know that conversation is creating some movement for that person and myself maybe as well. I'm okay with it. And I just said, no, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. This is where we get to the real juice here. This is where it really matters. And I think that's another piece too, is if people can just stay, you know what, that's the confrontation muscle. That's the discomfort muscle. Like I did with my dad, stay there until it comes to a solution. Find where you be surprised what happens afterwards, then take your time out.
Yeah, it's the 15th rep.
That's right. It is. Sometimes it's like, I can't do it. You know what? You can. Don't let your mind make you quit when it's the most uncomfortable because you're capable of a lot more than you think you are. And I think that's a big piece of it.
I think the thing that people lose sight of when they are healthy arguing is they get cruel sometimes and you can't take words back. And like you said, the idea that there has to be a winner, and that's just not what a partnership is.
In anything, business, friendships, intimate relationships, it should not be about a winner. It should be about a problem. You should be a problem solving together. It doesn't matter if someone is right or not. Again, my wife is right with certain things. I 100%. She's right. I'm not going to combat her and become an adolescent child and start lobbing insults because I don't like what she might be saying. If she tells me something and I didn't even think of it or I don't understand it, I would engage and go, what is that you need me to do right now? What did you just say? What I'm not seeing? What was it that I didn't just say? I will engage that because clearly the person outside of me saw, heard, felt something that maybe I'm not aware of. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think the other thing is people miss opportunities because they hear something, they don't like the way it sounds. They think it's wrong. They just go, you know what? My coach said something I didn't like. My therapist said something I didn't like. You know what? My friend said something I didn't. My lover. It doesn't matter. Maybe that's the thing you needed to hear to rattle whatever's in your way out so we can get to the clarity and we can then confront it together and we can create solution and evolution happens between us. So
See, we just solved all the world's problems just now. I'm so happy about that.
Oh my goodness. We have to get the ego and the evil and all the other things out of the way
ego
first.
Ego is relationship killer. Let's get into military. So you
Sure.
decide it's time to, you said you were still doing the bull riding during military. So when did you make that decision? And being a legacy, I get that. But what was the moment that you went, oh, this is my new path?
Well, candidly speaking, in full transparency, it was a 50-50 thing where my middle brother and I, my dad introduced us. We were in our boxing club in Anaheim, California. There was a gentleman there who was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I'll never forget him. Ed Kostick was his name. And my dad said, hey, Ed runs a program prep for a junior Marine Corps program called the Devil Pups. He's like, you guys want to do it? It's like kind of, we were in high school football at the time. You were getting ready for varsity as a sophomore. And I was like, yeah, let's do it, so let's go do it. So we got into that program, 12-week training program. And then 2 weeks, we did a 2-week boot camp at Camp Pendleton, California. We were away from our family for 2 weeks. And we're, 15 years old, I think at the time, or whatever it was. And we fell in love with the military, being around those, drills, those drill instructors, the Marine Corps, and how it was all this was awesome. My brother and I decided, you know what, instead of trying to figure out college or if we're going to play sports, what do you think about the military? So we literally had a conversation together about it. And I was like, well, Papa, both grandparents, Papa and Grandpa both served in World War II, D-Day vets as well. Uncles were Vietnam, Green Berets, things like that. My dad was a corpsman. So we had all these men in our family that served in the military, all combat veterans. Maybe we should consider that, We're like, let's talk to Dad about it. It got to the point where we were playing with the idea for a year or so because we weren't old enough to join yet. And I was still riding bulls, and my dad didn't like that. And I had just, I think I turned 17, and I got into a place where my dad was just like, okay, you have to make a decision. What do you want to do? You're going to throw away a professional baseball career, because he had scouts from different colleges that were looking at me. He's like, what do you want to do? And I said, I like what I'm doing. This is just makes me feel alive, and I am who I am here. Cowboy hat, the whole 9 yards, had the hawk feather in it. I embraced the whole culture. And I think there was a moment where I got into a fist fight at school with a guy who had poked fun at my cowboyness, if you will. And basically got expelled because I beat him up. And my dad was like, okay, enough's enough. Decide what you're going to do. And I said, you know what? Maybe I need to join the military. Maybe I need a little bit more discipline in my life. I even said that to myself. I was like, wow, why did I say that? And my dad was like, great. And my brother goes, I'm going to do it too when I get old enough. So we just committed to that. I think there was those coming to a head moments. It's almost like, it's like we've crossed the Rubicon. We can't really turn back. My dad, the next thing I know, I think a week after that, he had a recruiter sitting at our dinner table, an Army recruiter. And I sat down with the Army recruiter to explore my options, job, qualifications, etc. He's like, you're still in high school. What do you want to, you can join the Army Reserves. I said, let's do it. I can get some experience. So at 17 years old, I joined the United States Army Reserves as a active reservist. I went to boot camp between my junior and senior year of high school. So I got that training and experience. Came home, went to drill once per month. So I drove myself at 1 weekend per month down to Camp Pendleton from Orange County. Those 2 or 3 days at a time that we had to go do drill, getting the experience of PT formation. I told my first sergeant, I said, I want to jump out of airplanes and go to Ranger school. I want to be an Army Ranger. That's kind of where I wanted to really go do high speed stuff, shoot guns and, go fight bad guys. He's like, yeah, you don't belong in the reserves. So when I graduated, I signed the paperwork, I think March, that year of my graduation, 1998, to go active duty. And I left home right afterwards. And my brother went and joined the infantry, became a combat infantryman, served with the 101st Airborne Division out of the Rakkasans 187 Infantry Regiment as a mortarman specialized in mortar gun systems. And my middle brother joined right after me. He became an Army Ranger. He was actually going to go be a Navy SEAL, interestingly enough. But because of his wrestling and his high school football, all-state wrestler and football player, he had some knee injuries. So the Navy was like, I don't think you'll make it through BUDS. And he was like, okay, well, I just go get my black beret, my Ranger school, and go be special operations over here. He did that. And then my youngest brother decided he wanted to be like his older brothers. And he joined the Navy when he got old enough, became a corpsman.
Wow.
Yeah. So all 3 of us served during the global war on terrorism. Almost stayed in. I had 5 years and 2 months active duty, 5 years and 5 months active duty. Almost stayed in, but there's a lot of other stuff we could talk about for hours about that. But it was a great run.
And you did 3 active tours, combat.
I did Kosovo. I went to Kosovo in 2000. It was during what they call Operation Joint Guardian. I was part of Task Force Falcon. So it was a humanitarian aid peacekeeping operation over there. Of course, other things went down that we participated in. Right after the 1999, the whole campaign with the genocide, the ethnic cleansing that was happening over in that region, the Balkans. So they sent us over there. We relieved the 82nd Airborne when we got over there. And then I came home. I got promoted early to E4. I did a bunch of schools and things like that. And I got decided to re-enlist. So I re-enlisted for 3 more years and started training for Ranger School. And then September 11th happened. All our schools got postponed, so nobody could go. And we went to war. So I went to combat in Afghanistan, spent 7 months over there, came home 7 months after I got home. We went to Iraq and served in Iraq.
Even though you've been trained to high heaven and you have a concept of what's going to happen, that must have shifted as you were going through it in real life.
That's a really good way to put that. That's a great way to phrase that question is you can train as much as you want, but until you get put in the fire, you're really not going to know what you're capable of. And that's so true. It's real quick before I answer that question. It's like, I still shoot, I have guns and I like to go shoot. And my buddy and I, who was a former Navy guy, he said the same thing. He said, a lot of guys like to carry pistols. The culture now is all about, carrying your, concealed pistol with a laser dot on it. Everybody goes to the range. Everybody wants to do the shooting, look high speed, do the competitive shooting courses. But majority of people have never been put in a situation where they've had to use their weapon in a self-defense manner or get into a gunfight. And a lot of people don't know what they're capable of in a gunfight. You can train all you want to until you have that experience. Training sometimes in the initial phases of my very first altercation, all of your training, it's almost like it erupts and goes out the window for a few minutes before it all kind of comes back and everybody gets focused. Gunfights are not what the TV makes them out to be, what people think they are in the movies. Even when you hear stories about other combat veterans talking on podcasts, it's usually chaos right out of the gate. When you get a rocket shot at you, a grenade thrown to your convoy, your buddy's got hit in the chest coming off an aircraft into a hot LZ by an AK-47, and he hits the ground, gets up, keeps running. Until you start experiencing those things, it's amazing, though, how you can easily fall back into training, though. I would say that's where training to the hilt does pay dividends, even if it's chaos in that brief moment with the first gunshot, is because you calibrate to the chaos. So my very first weird altercation was in Kosovo on an operation I went on, but I didn't get hit. We didn't get engaged in any gunfight, but we almost did. The second time I got into someone was in Afghanistan in my first combat operation in the mountains of Afghanistan it's kind of like a light skirmish, if you will, with the Taliban. They were pop-shotting us from different hide sites and things like that. And I had to send mortar gun system. I had to send mortar rounds downrange to stop the threat and kind of take care of our guys. And I remember hearing the whiz of some of those AK rounds flying by, our position and hitting the dirt. And then hearing kind of like the mortar rounds going off in the distance they were shooting at us. And it's interesting is that first moment of chaos, everybody's kind of like going, okay, where is it coming from? Everybody's orienting themselves. And then when everybody clicks, you want to talk about the United States military being a well-organized mechanism in combat, it clicks. And when it clicked, it's like we turned into this precision machine that was capable of doing our job proficiently, so that as we were engaged, it's like rounds will go off around you. Nobody flinches. Nobody thinks about them anymore. We're just doing what we're trained to do. We're moving through it. We're hearing our radio communication and chatter, getting rounds downrange, putting mortars on target, shutting down cave complex systems, ending the targets that are out there kind of causing chaos around us. And then when it's done, it's almost like you get the adrenaline dump. And then that's like long range stuff. I think when I got into some stuff in Iraq, when I got into close quarters stuff in Iraq, a little bit of stuff, ambushes, things like that, it gets even more intense. And I can't even explain it. So it's like going back to bull riding. It's almost more an advanced version of that wild new introduction to chaos and unknowns. I remember the convoy that we were on got ambushed, and the 3 grenades they threw into the convoy hit a couple of my buddies. They got shrapnel. They didn't die. They were good. Thank God. But it's crazy how it feels different when you're really close and personal with these guys. And you're facing the ultimate evil. You're truly facing the worst of the worst when it comes to human beings. And I think that's where I'm glad we train as well as we do, is because when you're dealing with that, there's only 1 or 2 outcomes there. Either they're dying for their country or you are. So at the end of the day, it pays off to sweat a lot more in training, so that again, that saying goes, you bleed less and more. And I think that's what really stuck with me was I can still feel the energy or the emotions of that situation 20 years later. Those situations that I've had, yeah. There were people that all they wanted to do was kill us. It doesn't matter. They were using innocent people. And we had them using pregnant women to blow up our checkpoints. It's crazy to experience the worst of the worst in the world in a very intimate setting like that. And it changes your whole outlook on life. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think I am fascinated by how the military handles basically the job. You have to create killing machines. That's the job.
Sure.
And then how do you take those killing machines? Like how does someone sit you down and prepare you? Hey, I remember when I bought my first gun. And when I bought my first gun, I really had to sit with myself and think, am I willing to kill someone someday? Because having this means that answer has to be yes, or I shouldn't own this thing, because that's the reality. And in some respects, I think even having a car is like that.
Sure.
If you're in a car, that kills a lot of freaking people. It's that same thing. Yeah. So I'm curious about, how does the military, specifically in this case, the Army, sit you down and say, here's the deal. You are going to be put in scenarios where everything that you were raised to believe, which is thou shalt not kill. Yeah. How are you, and whether you're religious or not, that's sort of just the golden rule is ingrained in all of us. How does one flip that switch, other than, I guess, saying the psychology of they're bad, we're good? And then how do you unbecome that when you come home?
Well,
a lot of questions all at once.
No, it's good. I'm going to let that percolate in my mind so I can deliver good enough information for you and people. I think you have to be, I would say there are people that are built with from a different fabric that join the military and choose the combat arms jobs and MOSs. They know, already. So I grew up, again, in the 80s watching A-Team was one of my favorite shows growing up. They were the Green Berets that got away with all the. I loved different shows like that. I love learning military movies that I watched. Remember Top Gun came out, all of it. We already inherently Delta Force with Chuck Norris, it was always cool to see these movies. You knew though, growing up, that if you join the military is a mechanism for combat. That's the overarching, I would say, theme. I think if you don't know that, then you've been living under a rock. But the military is designed for warfare. They're designed for protecting and defending and asserting offensive as we need to for a purpose. So when we joined, I had stories already from my grandfather being a D-Day vet, fighting the Nazis, to my dad being a Vietnam corpsman in Vietnam, my uncle who was a Green Beret in Vietnam, MACV-SOG specifically, which is a little bit more elite group of that era. Hearing some of the war stories over scotch that I would drink with him, it's amazing as when you become old enough to choose that, what you're getting into. Now, you can choose jobs in the military that will kind of keep you a little bit more away from that type of environment. However, we're all first and foremost riflemen. So you all go to basic combat training for a reason. And global war and terrorism has proven that's necessity because we had non-combat arms MOSs getting engaged in firefights. There are guys I know that don't have CIBs like me and other fellows, the combat infantryman badge that we earned for being engaged in combat with the enemy. They have their own version of that, but their MOS was like supply, or they were maybe a cook, or they were put in a position in war where they had to defend themselves up camps, their brothers, etc. So I think the Army doesn't ask you or sit you down and tell you, hey, guess what? They just know that you better choose something that you're okay with. Because if you become, like I knew when I joined the infantry, my job would be to learn how to kill people. I understand that, period. It's infantry. That's our job, to destroy the targets that are put in front of us for the enemies of the United States of America. 100% get that. Growing up as a devout Catholic, right? Growing up in the by that where thou shalt not kill, that was one where I had to actually learn, getting out of the military, learning about, well, what is the difference then? Because did I just do something really bad, even though I want to know I'm defending my country? I joined, selflessly served the oath to this nation, to my family. I did it under God. I did it for my family, my brethren, my loved ones. And I found out the distinction is that it is not the same as just murdering someone. There is a completely different parameter that's there when it comes to the defense of one's nation for a very specific cause. For morals, values, for freedoms, liberties. So I was like, okay, I was okay with that after I learned that through some of the chaplains I talked to in the military after our first combat rotation. But it's interesting. It affects everybody differently. So I'm not going to say that I didn't have my own rage issues coming home and wanting to, I like to fight and I wanted to get to some of these things that here and there, but everybody has their own experience in war and everybody's affected differently in war. It's not one size fits all with post-traumatic stress or combat trauma or whatever it is, because I know guys that have seen death and destruction and are not they're not as broken, if you will, as you would think they would be. If anything, getting out of the military, going to the second part of your question, how do you deprogram or get someone ready? I think leaving the military and not doing that job anymore it causes more stress on a soldier than the war sometimes can. I think it's like we tie our identities to that job. We become part of this brotherhood. We unite for one purpose and one mission. I talked to a Navy SEAL about this. He goes, you miss it because you had guys to the left and right of you that you could trust with your life, and you guys were all focused on the same mission, and you guys were selfless. In the civilian world, everyone's selfish. Everyone's out for themselves. So I think that's a twofold answer there, whereas nobody prepares you for what you're going to have to do. That's what training is for, and that is what your oath is. That's what you swear to. I'm willing to defend those that cannot defend themselves for the rights, liberties, and freedoms that we cherish and hold valuable in our world. And I'm willing up to including giving my life and or taking a life to do that. You come to terms with that. And my brother and I talked about it. He, has had a lot more direct action because he was a Ranger experience with gunfights and killing people, bad guys. I had my own fair share. We talk about it. He was completely affected a lot differently than I was. So, and then when we both go, we miss it because it affects us trying to go to school. You get out, you're an older person, you're going to college with younger kids, and you're sitting there and you're like, this is what I am now. Okay, I kind of miss. I want to go back and do that because I had at least the structure and the discipline, and I had team, and I had all this mission, this purpose. And a lot of guys that serve, you listen to some of these former operators that get out 20 plus years later. They're on these podcasts. Sean Ryan talks with a lot of these guys, et cetera. They say the same thing. It's like, who am I now? I leave and now I don't know what I'm going to that was me. The job was me. I was a Delta operator. I was a Ranger. I was a SEAL. I was a Green Beret. I was an infantryman, airborne infantry. Now what am I supposed to be? And that I think messes with a lot of men, especially the guys, their heads, because men tie their legacy to the jobs they do and they don't know how to elegantly transition. And I think it takes having the right support systems in place and having the right people around you that can contain you and push you in the right direction. So you realize that is not who you are. That's what you did. And you can apply and parlay those skills and those attributes to other jobs or other things in the world. And you can still live the same life of principle and carry the scars that you carried without actually having to worry about whether or not you are living the life you were meant to live. And I think that's the biggest piece to it is you get out, you go through the process of grieving. I lost buddies of mine. You go through the process of the death you've seen, process of taking a life. You process that, you pray on it, you heal from it, you go to psychologists, you do all the therapies, you do as much as you feel drawn to just understand it and how it's affecting you as a human. And then you confront the demons of it and you allow that to resolve big parts of those stresses so you can actually move forward in life and you can show up and perform in relationships and get other jobs. Some veterans don't have that. They miss that step. And that's why you see them struggling is they don't have that. And they don't have someone that can confront it, push them through and make them experience. They don't want to look at the demons anymore. They just let the demons hide in the corner, let it affect them. And they just kind of live the life kind of unfortunately in a bad place. And that's where a lot of us go 22 a day is unacceptable, right? So that those people are doing that. And so it's interesting. It's a very interesting experience. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I have some friends, unfortunately, that do struggle. Certainly, it's weird. I read a lot about, especially the younger generation, and I get what they're saying. That we don't want to fight these wars, and the thing that's complicated about it. Look, nobody wants to go to war. Nobody wants that, even if you're raised. I mean, look, I saw Top Gun. I was ready to sign up. Who wasn't? I was on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, who doesn't get? That's why the military helps pay for movies like that because it gets us psyched.
It's a recruiting tool.
Absolutely, it gets us psyched.
Yeah.
So now we are in a new era, and I get the understanding of why should I be sent to fight these battles. I get that on one hand, certainly, and but the unfortunate reality is, even in 2024, nothing changes with humanity. It just doesn't, and there's always going to be somebody out there wanting to kill you. Not you, the royal you. Let's just use United States of America as the you.
The you.
It's just, that's the reality. And if there aren't people willing to take that fight, to take up that sacrifice, then there's big trouble ahead.
There is. And
I know that intellectually.
Yes.
It's hard to explain that. And I get, it's like I get both sides of the argument.
Sure, I do too.
But it sort of leaves out reality. Just because there's a bunch of people that don't want to do this doesn't mean it's not going to keep happening.
Right, exactly. And that's such a good point you brought up, because I've had this in my mind constantly for the last year and a half. I hear it all the time across social media posts and people, legacy military families. Everyone is saying, don't join the military. It's the worst leadership ever. Don't go fight globalist agenda wars. It's like, okay, guys, gals, I understand that argument.
I do too.
But here's the other side. Like, you'll probably appreciate this. Here's my argument for it. We have never not had greedy, political, ulterior motives in any conflict we've ever been a part of. Ever. If anyone thinks that we've ever fought one single war that has been 100% altruistically based on freedom, liberty, and happiness, period. End of story. America. They're delusional.
Yes.
They're delusional. The difference now in 2024 is that because of social media and technology advancements and global changes, we are now more exposed to the other side of the veil than we have ever been before. We see the ambitions of politicians and greedy corporations and bad public figures.
And we see children dying, and we see what the results are. Yeah.
We see that. All of it combined together is just being shoved in our face all at one time. World War II, there was ulterior motives. Vietnam, 100%. There was a lot of ulterior. I mean, all of it. Desert Storm. Global war and terrorism. I'm going to say it. My war as well. I look at it this way: is you made a very valid point. I want to just bring that home a little bit more. Is if we don't have people who are still willing to sacrifice and actually step up to the challenge and to serve, not for that, but for the other factors of why we all serve to begin with. Every person has ever served in the military. I guarantee if you ask them, why did you join? Well, the majority of them, I would say, not now, but the majority I would say is like, because I wanted to do something for something greater than me. I wanted to selflessly serve my community. I wanted to give back to my country that I was born in. I've heard so many really patriotic things. There are some people like, I want the college money. Yeah, that's them.
Yeah.
Majority
and
of us.
Historically, the military certainly turns toward the poor and says, hey, you're our people. And that's fucked up. We all know that.
Yes, we do. And that's not, it's not like the rich, the whole ultra wealthy are like putting their kids in that place. I think there was a gentleman I spoke with the other day too. He talked about it. He said, yeah, that's why it was the Navy guy. He says the United Kingdom is less likely to go to war. He's writing a dissertation because he's a PhD professor for history, and he's writing a dissertation on why America is always going to be primed to go to war more than, let's say, the UK. And that's because they already have status in the armed forces over there. These guys are all from royal families. They're all wealthy. So when they go to war and they come home, they kind of go back to their normal life. But when we go to war, we can be poor. We come home and we get these attaboys and these parking spots, and we get all these accolades. And so that will put us on this competition agenda where we're always going to be in a position where we're always going to fight these. We're more likely to fight wars. That's one piece of it. I thought that was a pretty brilliant way to put it.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
The other piece, to go back to your question or your thought here, was if we don't have people, though, still willing to serve their country, to say, hey, look, I don't like this over here, but I still know there's good here, and I want to serve this still to protect it. You're right. We're in dire straits. At some point, it's going to get worse than it is now, where we're only going to continuously have bad people in the military that are going to deteriorate it with all of their agendas. And then we're going to have good people getting out, and we're no longer going to have a force that's going to be worthy of defending our borders and our foreign policies, et cetera. We're not going to be able to be what we once were. And then we're going to be in a place where now we're vulnerable and we're capable, in a position where people can do a lot of bad things to us. And it's going to deteriorate the United States from within, which is the only way you can take us down. And I think that's the argument there is like, well, I don't want to go die for a foreign war. Dude, nobody wants to die for any war. My buddy got hit by an RPG in Iraq, didn't want to die for Iraqi freedom. You know what I mean? But he did. So he did what he was asked to do because we don't have the choice when we sign up. We're not like, I'll go to Afghanistan, but I won't go to Iraq. Doesn't happen that way. We're going to go where we're needed. If you can go in with the idea and the mindset that I'm doing something that for the greater good here, even if it's a short period of time, maybe we need to start challenging veterans and start challenging other capable men and women to at least get into the fight for a short period of time. Bringing quality leadership back into the military can actually change the culture back to a place where we are war fighters, not worried about people's feelings, and we can actually sustain the military until we can figure out how to fix this political debacle that we've got going on, and we can change it from that perspective. You need the military to be strong. And I think that's the piece. And I'll throw this out. I'm going to throw this in the hat here is I'm in fact in the process of potentially re-enlisting in the military. So at 44 years old, as a grown up in a patriotic household, love my country. I love, what I was able to be born into. I was able to grow up in. I've served my country. I've seen the ups and downs, the good and bad. I know what the military is. So I'm going in with my eyes wide open. I'm not an idiot, but I'm being called and being pulled in my heart. Something's on my heart telling me I need to go back. And I've talked to so many people who are like, we need good quality people to come back in to help. I would say it's almost like prop up the failing leadership, prop up the failing policies and kind of get us back on track. And I've talked to some other vets that are like, I'm willing to do it too. So there are a lot of veterans like, you know what? Will they take me? And yes, at your, they'll age waiver you if you've already served. They subtract your active duty by your biological age and they make you that age. They age waiver you, pass the physical stuff. You can get the contract you want and go back in and serve where you want to serve. So I'm willing to do that because I feel like we need mentorship for these younger generations going in right now. We need older guys who've had the combat experience, the leadership experience. I've been running my own business for almost 15 years. I can bring it into this perspective where to help mold some of these younger kids coming in so they don't get lost in the pipeline of the military and fall victim to anything but what they were signing up to do. And I think that it's going to require immense sacrifice and personal courage. It's going to require people to set their egos down and go, you know what, let me be a little bit more objective with what, this is entailing here. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and especially because a lot of the people that are being recruited in, unfortunately, are bringing in agendas that do not represent. When you decide to serve, and tell me if I'm incorrect here, but when you decide to serve the military, you're serving all of the United States of America, not just your favorite religion, not your favorite color, not your favorite creed or your favorite sexual orientation, or you are protecting and serving the entirety of the United States of America and its Constitution and everything that stands for. Yes. And I think, unfortunately, there is, I don't know how many, I don't keep track of the stats, but there is a faction of military people that are coming in that are like, I'm going to fight and make sure that none of those people ever get to live, that kind of thing. And that's dangerous because it's not the point.
No, you don't need to do, and that's the other thing. You don't need to, sometimes the confrontation to change things that you feel is not boding well for something that you value or cherish doesn't need to be so direct action. You don't need to go in there and be like, I need to combat this leader who's acting this way. Sometimes getting in there and doing your job exceptionally well, creating real leadership transformation by an example of it. And it's almost like encouraging other people to follow suit through your actions and not your words, right? Deeds, not words. That naturally will evolve whatever dysfunction you might have noticed going on in there. You don't see, I think people get too hell-bent on it. Again, it's like they have this like righteous purpose and they go, you know what, but is it a good righteous purpose? Or is it just a personal thing that there are a lot of things the military is doing I don't like either. But my job is not to go in there and go, hey, you can't do that. My job is to say, hey, if I go back in, I'm going to be the best version of me as this guy that I have become, this leader that whatever I can exude and share with these young men and women. And I'm going to let that birth whoever they are so that naturally influences the ranks. And I think, but there is some moments where you do have to step up and be confrontational and go, you know what? No, we're not going to worry about that right now because that actually diminishes the warfighting capabilities here. And here's why. And then you go after that way. Discernment is the key muscle that needs to be worked. But the United States, when we swear to an oath, we swear an oath to the United States Constitution. And that oath never ends, period. Even if we get out, it's to the Constitution and what that, like you said, what that encompasses. The right, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, all of it, the Bill of Rights, first, second, third, fourth, all of the 10th, we are swearing an oath. That's our allegiance to that, period.
Not politics, not religion.
Not to a man in the office.
Right.
Not to a type of person who's running this entity over here. Not to a faction of people who are extreme on one side or the other of the aisle. To that. And I think we've lost our way because of that, because we've become hyper polarized and we've become hyper tribalized, and everybody is focused on their own encampments. It's become selfish. People are losing resiliency when it comes to emotional maturity. People don't like the way things are said. They don't like the way people are saying them. They don't like certain things. I think that's the problem, and we have to defend it. But here's the thing: you only change the military itself. Since we're on that subject, you only change the dysfunction of the military that's happening from the inside.
With leaders who understand, yeah.
Can't do it from the outside. With leaders, you can't. You can spend all day long on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. You can spend all day on there complaining all day long and talking about this and that and posting articles and retweeting and yelling and telling people don't do it. It's the worst thing ever. That's not going to change it. It's just not going to. You got to be willing to put skin in the game. And if you're not willing to do that, honestly, it's just all gas. It's just coming out hot gas. And granted, there are some people that are making some changes through their efforts, but again, I've seen more smoke than I've seen action. And I'm like, guys, we got to step up.
Yeah, it's much easier to talk than it is for action. That's the easiest thing in the world to do.
Even if you've done it. If you've done it already, you've paid your dues. So what? I have too. I'm willing to go do it again.
Yeah.
I'm willing to.
Wylie, you're fun to talk with.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Tell people how they can find you, and there may be some emails coming your way to talk to you about, everything that we've discussed here from your perspective, because I can't speak for you, obviously. So tell people how they can find you if they want to. Well,
yeah, I threw together a website a couple of years ago, WylieMcGraw.com. It's got just all the really interesting philosophies. It touches on some of the stuff you and I talked about today, videos, et cetera. Just a place for people to kind of get a one-dimensional understanding a little bit about who I am. I'm more of an interpersonal kind of guy. I like conversations on phones and emails, and I'm not a transactional person, so it's not about, I don't sell myself. I don't go out and go, hey, I have a business. You want to work with me? That's just not that's just not how I've ever operated. It's always been just relationship dynamics, building relationships, meeting people. The right people will always be the right people at the right timing. I'm not, stressed about that either. So I don't, want people to think that, oh gosh, this is another guy who's just out selling some coaching, because that's not what I do either. This reality is I am here to just share insights and philosophies and understandings about what might be, hindering people's performance and messing with their lives and helping them challenge the status quo, challenge what they think is right, wrong, or different, or comfortable or uncomfortable, and realize there's so much more that you are missing if you don't have the right types of people confronting those realities with you. So WylieMcGraw.com. I have my account at Twitter at Wylie McGraw. I'm hardly on there, but I sometimes jump on there, have some interesting back and forth with people, post podcasts and stuff like this. LinkedIn.com. I have that too. Yes, I'm trying to think all the social media stuff I put together. I spent 12 years behind the scenes without any digital presence. So it's kind of...
Those were the days.
Those were the days. The pandemic changed all of that for us. But those are the three spots people can find me. And of course, my contact information is there. If anybody wants to just chat, I'm always open for it.
Yeah, and I'll put links on heyhumanpodcast.com as well. And I really appreciate your time. You're great to chat with. You have an open door anytime you want to come on the show.
I really appreciate you having me. It's been fun. I look forward to maybe doing it again soon.
Yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day.
Well, I'm happy to go round too. You're fun to talk to as well. You ask really good questions that really allow more information to kind of pour out. It's good.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.
You too. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.